Hi, today we are doing lesson 12, session 1. We are going to be starting our fraction unit, and so we're going to be starting with adding fractions. So today we will review how to add fractions that have common denominators, and we'll also begin to explore adding fractions with uncommon denominators. So before we get started, well, first of all, we're going to be working in our Ready Classroom Math Workbook on pages 227 through 230. So if you'd like, you can go ahead and take out your Ready Classroom Math Workbook and turn to page 227. Before we begin, though, I'm going to review some of our math vocabulary that we may or may not use as we're going through this. Well, we definitely will use as we're going throughout the next few lessons. So the first fraction vocabulary word that we're going to look at is the word numerator. So the numerator is the number above the line in a fraction that tells you the number of equal parts being described. So if we're looking at a fraction, remember that the numerator is the number on the top or above the line, and it tells you how many parts of the whole we have. The denominator is the number below the line in a fraction that tells you the number of equal parts in a whole. So it's the number that's underneath the fraction line, and it tells us how many parts are in a whole. A common denominator is a number that is a common multiple of the denominator of two or more fractions. So in this example, 1/3 plus 2/3, the 2 3's are the same. And so if we added 1/3 plus 2/3, we would get 3/3. So we can add those two fractions together because they have the same denominator. Equivalent fractions are two or more different fractions that name the same part of a whole or the same point on a number line. So for example, we have 1/2. 1/2 is the same as 2/4. 2/4 is the same as 4/8. They all are going to be the same fraction of a whole. Even though they are different fractions, they're all going to tell you the same amount. A mixed number is a fraction with a whole number part and a fractional part. So an example would be 2 3/5. The 2 is our whole number part, and the 3/5 is our fractional part. And then finally, the word multiple. A multiple is the product of any given number and any other whole number. So for example, if we had all of these multiples, 4, 8, 12, 16, all of those numbers, and we could continue going, are all multiples of 4. 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 4 times 12 is, 4 times 3 is 12, and 4 times 4 is 16. And we could keep going on forever and ever. So all of that vocabulary is going to come into play as we're going to start exploring adding fractions, and more specifically, adding fractions with uncommon denominators. So now we're going to go ahead and we will be on page 227. So page 227 says, you know how to add fractions with like denominators. Now you will learn how to add fractions with unlike denominators. Use what you know to try and solve the problem below. So here's the problem. Emiliano needs a half a stick of butter to make cornbread. He also needs a quarter of a stick of butter to make apple muffins. What fraction of a stick of butter does he need in all? We could also read that as Emiliano needs 1/2 stick of butter to make cornbread. He also needs 1/4 stick of butter to make apple muffins. What fraction of stick butter does he need in all? So first of all, what is this question talking about? It's talking about butter and how much butter we need. And what problem are we trying to solve? What fraction of a stick of butter does he need in all? And then what is the important information? Well, we know that he needs 1/2 of a stick of butter to make cornbread. and he needs 1/4 of a stick of butter to make apple muffins. So I want you to use what you know about fractions and to go ahead and try solving this on your own. So go ahead and pause the video here and try and go ahead and give it a whirl and see what you come up with. When you're ready, you can unpause and we can go over and try a strategy that I might use. Go ahead and pause it now. Okay, so we have, if I were going to do this, I think one strategy that works pretty well is using like a bar graph representation. I don't even know if that's what you would call it, but it's basically I'm going to draw a picture. And this picture, I think, is going to help me solve. So here's what I would do first. First, we know that we need 1/2 of a stick of butter. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this picture of a stick of butter. Now, I know that I need 1/2 of this stick of butter. So I'm going to take this stick of butter and break it in half. And then I'm going to highlight or fill in 1/2 of this stick of butter. So that's how much that Emiliano needs for the cornbread. Then I see that he also needs 1/4 of a stick of butter to make apple muffins. So he needs some more. But this time I can't break it in half because he needs 1/4 of a stick of butter. So I'm going to break the stick of butter up into 4 parts because he only needs 1/4 of a stick of butter. Now, it's kind of hard to add both of those together because this is 1/2 of a stick of butter, and then this is for the apple muffins. And then down here, I have 1/4 of a stick of butter, or 1/4 a stick of butter. So I need to make both of these have equal size holes, so that I can figure out how many parts I need all together. So I recognize that I could take this stick of butter and break it up into fourths. And then it would match what I have here. So I can see that 1/2 is the same as how many fourths? Well, I shaded in 2, and I have 4 all together, so it's the same as 2/4. So now when I look and I see that I have 2/4, I can write the equation 2/4 plus 1/4 equals 3/4. So Emiliano needs 3/4 of a stick of butter. So the way that I figured that out was I knew that 1/2 is the same as 2/4. I made an equivalent fraction. And then I recognized that both of these denominators are the same. So now, because both of these denominators are the same, the number of parts in a whole stays the same, and then we can add our numerators together to get 2 plus 1 equals 3. Okay, if this isn't making sense to you, we're going to keep going. I promise you that by the end of the next few days, it will make a lot more sense to you. So go ahead and turn to page 228. All right, so on page 228, it says, explain how you found out how much butter Emiliano needs. So here's what we did. I found a common denominator for 1/2 and 1/4. The common denominator was fourths. Then I added 2/4 because 2/4 is an equivalent fraction to 1/2. So I added 2/4 and 1/4 and got 3/4 of a stick of butter. Looking ahead, let's go down there. All right. Looking ahead, before adding fractions, the fractions must have the same size parts of a whole. That means they need to have a common denominator. We cannot add the parts if they do not have the same size parts of a whole or a common denominator. You can use what you know about multiples and equivalent fractions to find a common denominator for fractions that have unlike denominators. So we're going to use the fractions 1/2 and 1/3. We are going to write the next 4 multiples of each denominator and then circle the multiple that 2 and 3 have in common. So they've already done, for multiples of 2, 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 5 is 10. And 2 times 6 is 12. When we look at multiples of 3, 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12. And 3 times 5 is 15. Now we're going to circle the multiple that 2 and 3 have in common. So they actually have 2 multiples in common. They both have a 6 and they both have a 12. But we're looking for the smallest number that they both have in common. That's called the least common multiple. So in this case, the least common multiple is 6. That means that if we use the multiple of 6 in our denominator, we can create equivalent fractions so that we can add these two numbers together. So now it says, complete the models and equations to show equivalent fractions for 1/2 and 1/3 using the common multiple as the common denominator. So let's look here. We see that we have 1/2 because the original fraction we started with is 1/2. Now, if we were to color in 1/2 of this pie or of this circle, we're going to color in all of this half of the circle. But when we look at that, here, this circle is broken into, or let's look over here. This circle is broken into 2 parts, so our denominator is 2, and one side is shaded in, so our numerator is 1. In this circle, it's still, now we have more pieces. We now have 6 pieces, or 6 parts of the whole. And how many parts did we shade in? 1, 2, 3. So there, a 3 goes there. So 1/2 is equivalent to 3/6. As you can see, they both show the same amount of the circle. They both have half of the circle filled in. But this fraction uses the denominator of 2 because the circle is broken into 2 parts. This fraction here uses the denominator of 6 because this circle is broken into 6 parts. But they both are equivalent, meaning they both are equal. Now, when we look at this 1/3, we see that we have 3 parts. The circle is broken into 3 parts, and we've colored in 1 part. Over here, we're going to see how many parts do we shade in to make our pictures match. So we're going to shade in that part and that part. So now when we look at the pictures, the 2 pictures match. Now here, we've broken the circle into 6 parts again, because that was our common multiple. And then how many parts did we shade in? We shaded in 2. So 1/3 is equal to 2/6, or 1/3 is an equivalent fraction to 2/6. So now, if we look here, using the equivalent fractions to add, we know that we were trying to add 1/2 and 1/3, but we couldn't just add them the way that they were because they did not have a common denominator. 2 and 3 are different, so we can't just add them. We have to turn them into equivalent fractions. So using our picture, we recognize that 1/2 is equivalent or equal to 3/6. So we're going to change that 1/2 to 3/6. And then this 1/3 is equivalent or equal to 2/6. So then we're going to add 2/6 to 3/6. So now we can add them because they have a common denominator. The denominator stays the same. When you're adding fractions, you never change the denominator, you only change the numerator. So we're going to go ahead and add 3 plus 2 equals 5. So if somebody asked you how much is 1/2 plus 1/3, the answer would be, after you found the lowest common denominator or the lowest common multiple, the answer would be 5/6. So if we reflect back, the number blank is a common multiple of 2 and 3. So what common multiple did we use? Find that number up here. What was the common multiple that we used? So you can use the equivalent fractions. And so I want you to show me what the equivalent fractions were that you added together to get your final answer. And I will tell you that your final answer here is 5/6. Go ahead and pause your video, write this down, and fill in the missing fractions and the missing multiple. All right, when you're done with that, you can go ahead and go to page 229. Now, 229 is our graphic organizer, and we are talking about common denominators. So a common denominator is when 2 or more fractions have the same denominator. They have a common denominator. So our examples here are, we have 1/2. This is 1/2. It's equal to 3/6 because this circle is broken into 6 parts and we shaded in 3. Here we have 1 part shaded in and there's 3 parts all together, so that is 1/3, and it is equivalent or equal to 2/6 because we have 2 parts shaded in, which is our numerator, and then 6 parts in the whole for our denominator. Another example is 1/4 is equal to 3/12. If you multiplied both the 1 and the 4 times 3, you would get 3/12. 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times 3 is 3. 1/6 is equal to 2/12 because 6 times 2 is 12 and 1 times 2 is 2. So now if we wanted to, we could add these together because they both have a common denominator of 12. We could not have added 1/4 and 1/6 together because they do not have the same denominator. They have to be the same to add them. Another example is if we were trying to find the lowest common multiple between 2 and 5, because we can't add 1/2 and 1/5. 2 and 5 are not the same. So first we find all the multiples of 2. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Then we find all the multiples of 5 until we find a common multiple. 5, 10. The common multiple is 10. 5 times 2 is 10. 2 times 5 is 10. So now we can make both of these denominators 10. So 1/2 is equivalent to 5/10 because 5 is half of 10. And then we're going to add to that 2/10 because 2/10 is equivalent to 1/5. Finally, because our denominators are now the same, we can keep the denominator the same and we can add the two numerators to get the new numerator. So 1/2 plus 1/5 after we make equivalent fractions equals 7/10. So now you're going to go ahead and finish page 229 on your own. Then you're going to go ahead and do page 230, numbers 3 and 4. After you finish, then you can ask your teacher what to do next. If you have any questions, as always, you can email your teacher. And until I see you next time.